everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Nabila Qureshi, and I guess I'll be in conversation with both our filmmakers here today. I'm very excited to know more about the films that they have brought to this festival, and I think we're going to dive in deep and really start dissecting the themes and the structure of all things film related. So I guess first things first is it'd be lovely if both of you could just tell us a little bit about your story, your background, like what brings you to the world of film, I suppose, and then just all things film related, a little bit about yourselves. So I guess I'll start with Ashley McDonald, and then we'll go on to Yoni Collins.
Okay, so I'm actually a social worker. I graduated just a few years ago from social work school, but I've worked in nonprofit in the community for about 12 years. And I came into film by seeing the Nickel Film Festival advertising for a 30-day, 5-minute film challenge. And I was like, that sounds fun. And so I made a 5-minute film. So that's actually how I came into it. I've never done anything in film before. It's definitely not my background. I was fortunate enough to have met Dominic, who is here, through my social work and nonprofit career, and he has done film. So when he heard that I was trying to do something, he asked if I wanted some assistance with that. And thank God, because I don't know what would have happened. But yeah, so a social worker who just happened upon a film idea, which was about my own journey. So September 7th, 2012 is the day that I was sexually assaulted. And that's, so we're almost 11 years ago now. And so when I saw the initial advertisement for the Nickel Festival, my first idea that came into my head was, gosh, I wonder what other people were doing that day. And I wonder if anybody would want to watch a film about that. And I just rolled with it. And so from there, I went on to connect with people in the community and ask them what they were doing. And so essentially the film ends up being, a piece of my story and a piece of me, but mostly, I think anyways, a story about me connecting with community and with other people.
And Yoni Collins.
Thanks. I got into film growing up watching all the movies, the classic story. But my high school didn't have any arts or film programs or anything like that, so I basically kind of studied it from scratch myself. And I picked up my first film textbooks in the Army, when I was in the Army before, and basically studied them in my downtime, and then right out the Army went to film school and did that whole path, did a documentary training program and got into that. And this is the first one that I'm releasing that I've directed. For the most part, I've produced and edited films. But yeah, I went to York University in Toronto for film studies, Sheridan College in Oakville for advanced film and television for producing and editing, and the doc workshop I did was the Jerusalem Film Workshop in Israel for documentary production. And this film is Lanterns Flicker, and it's definitely a big full circle from studying film textbooks in the Army. It's a music documentary about a veteran from PEI named Dennis McKenzie. He was in Afghanistan and came back with severe PTSD and tried everything to kind of treat it, and finally turned to music to treat it and songwriting. And he recorded an album about his experiences in the military and with post-trauma, and now uses music to raise awareness of veteran suicide and mental health. So the film really focuses on the aspect of veteran suicide in Canada and kind of making people aware and bringing it together and raising awareness to prevent it for others and connecting through it.
So both of you have obviously touched upon not just your own stories, but also sort of the synopsis of both your films as well. I guess I'll pose this question to both of you, but I mean, I watched both of them, and the first thought that came to my mind was, the sort of like the generic question, but very important, that what motivated you to say, okay, this is a story that I really want to do something with and bring to the film screen, as opposed to just, reflect on and just, keep it personal? Why did you decide to go public with it and bring it into this realm of film? So I guess I'll go with Ashley first.
I guess not too many years ago, I myself was influenced by seeing another survivor coming out and, pushing the boundaries and sharing stories. And I was so influenced by that it made me start to talk about my story. And then over the last few years, started to realize how impactful hearing her come forward was. And then I would hear people come to me and say, oh, thank you for sharing your story. And I really thought about that full circle kind of thing of like, well, if I was impacted and then other people told me they were impacted, and we can influence each other's lives, and maybe another survivor seeing me say like, hey, it's been 10 years and I don't want to die anymore, like maybe that's what another survivor needs to hear. And so if I can share that in a bigger space, maybe that's helpful for someone. Maybe for other people it's not, but maybe for some people that will resonate with them, and maybe it'll give them a glimpse of hope or a moment of pause to say like, gosh, maybe next week might be better. Maybe next year might be a little bit better. And so, yeah, I think my push was pretty much purely to want other survivors to see potential hope, mixed in with wanting communities to see how important it was to support.
Yeah, and yourself?
I think my one came out a little bit differently. The way I found Dennis McKenzie, the veteran, was totally random. I was filming another documentary at the time, which is being edited now, called For a New Generation, and that's going to be finished this year. And I came home from interviewing a Holocaust survivor on Remembrance Day, and whenever I do an interview like that, I'm like, I got to do something completely different for a bit and get my mind off it. And it was Remembrance Day, so I was just kind of surfing the internet, and I saw this article that said something along the lines of Canadian Afghanistan war veteran uses music to soothe PTSD. And the reason I connected to it, I was like, I was in the Army, I'm a musician, this is just cool. So I was like, I didn't know everything yet from the veteran suicide aspect and the PTSD aspect. I didn't know how deep it was. And originally my plan was to make a documentary about the album, which I really, really enjoyed. It's called The Guardian Angel Platoon, and it's on Spotify. But I was originally going to do just a track-by-track kind of album breakdown, and then when I really dove into the story and heard the music and spoke to Dennis, that's when I was hearing about the veteran suicide aspect. And I think coming from a military background, I know that mental health gets affected badly in the Army. And I know a lot of people with PTSD. And that was when I really honed in on it, was just from doing the research, and really wanted to bring that to the forefront of the story.
How do you design or put together the telling of such topics and stories, given the sensitive nature of these topics? And were there any ethical considerations that you had in mind as you were pursuing these story ideas?
Yeah, that was a really big part of the process for myself and Dom as we started in on this. So, working in the community and being social workers and having an understanding of trauma-informed practice and what it means to, delve into people's traumas, that became kind of forefront for me. Was I can tell my own story and I know what my boundaries are and what my limits are, but I'm about to go ask other people about their stories without knowing what their mental health looks like, what space they're in. I don't know these people very well. So how can I approach this, without potentially triggering people, maybe setting people back in their processes? And so we took a trauma-informed approach to it, which is in our social work, that's a thing that is very important. And so one of the things that we did, it sounds really small, but we asked everybody who we were interviewing, where do you want to meet? What space is comfortable for you? And most people chose either their own home or a place that they felt safe in, or something like that. Like they picked a location. And so allowing them to, first of all, pick a space that's safe for them, that allows them comfort and that feels secure, that was like piece number one. And we never asked, we tried not to anyways, ask any like really leading questions. So it was like, you tell me your story, what is it? And then if they gave me anything that was like we didn't delve. It was just, what story do you want to tell me? I'm here to hear your story. You tell me what that story is. And I'm not going to say like, oh, that sounds like a spot to dig for a story. It's like, nope. They told me what they're comfortable telling me. And, we met these people a couple of times. And so maybe they told me a bit more the second time. But that's up to them, and them understanding that this was going to be like on film in the world, and that at some point that means I lose control over it, which means they've definitely lost control over it, was a big conversation too. Like making sure that they understood that there does reach a point where I can't take this back. And so if you're agreeing to be a part of this, it means you also can't take this back. Because that's a conversation I had with myself. You're about to put this into the world. This is your trauma. This is your story. How much do you want to share? Who do you want to share it with? What does it mean to you if it goes on YouTube? What does it mean to you if anyone can watch it? And those are the conversations and the questions that we had to think about and ask for me to feel like we were that we were being as trauma informed and as ethical as we could be in telling the story, because there is like, you're still putting someone on screen. You can't fully control what that's going to do in their lives. So understanding that as well. I don't know if that answered the question.
Definitely answered. Sounded good. I think for me, the only moral thing that I struggled with was before shooting. We shot at a cemetery. I wanted to shoot at a cemetery of a veteran who committed suicide, and his aunt is actually here tonight. Lives in St. John's, and the veteran's name was Scott McDougall. He was a Master Corporal, and I was like, it was hard for me to shoot in a place that I just wanted to leave him to rest. I think it's a lot to come into a cemetery and ask someone's family to film there, but I knew that it was important for the film, and I knew what I was trying to do with it, and I really expressed it that way, that it's a form of respect, and it's a form of, we're really doing this to raise awareness of it. So that was definitely the trickiest, but the scene was definitely powerful and becomes like a very pivotal moment, which I'm very happy that the legacy can really be strong and more hopeful now. And that was a tough one. The other one was definitely less intense, similar to what you were saying about what a subject says can make it out into the world. And Dennis McKenzie basically told me that he came up with the concept for the album while getting psychological mushroom treatment for PTSD. And I was like, can I put that in? I'm not sure if it's legal. But it is. And yeah, PTSD now uses mushrooms for treatment, and it's becoming a bigger thing. And drugs in general are definitely, and psychedelics in general, are becoming a bigger thing to treat PTSD. So I included it. I asked him. He was like, go ahead. He's totally open about it. And yeah, we used that. Those were my only two things, I think, very morally.
Were there any moments when perhaps things didn't go as planned, in the production process? You encountered hiccups or unexpected circumstances that really made you stop and think, how do I proceed ahead now?
The number of times Dom heard me say, the universe just doesn't want this to happen right now, I think he got a little tired of it. But eventually he got on board. He was like, yeah, the universe, okay. Literally full interviews deleted off of off of the drive, like just disappeared for no reason. And you're just like, oh, that was 4 hours of my life I'll never get back. But every hiccup that happened, that is really how I kind of approached it. It was just like, okay, I guess this just isn't the direction. This isn't the way. This isn't, because in the back of our heads, at the beginning of all this, it was like, maybe we'll find a baby who was born that day. Maybe we'll find people who got engaged that day. But those were like weird thoughts in the back of our heads. But what's delivered to you is completely different. And so just really settling into like, this is what's showing up. This is what's in front of us. Like, let's move forward with what we have. And, we have beautiful things. Whether or not something else got deleted or if we didn't get a baby being born, we still, I think that means we actually got the more like earnest stories. Like we got the ones that were meant to be a part of this. And so, so there was, and then we didn't have money for a long time. And then I got really tired of it because I didn't want to tell my story anymore. And so like, all of those things happened. And there was a point when Dom was like, all right, if you want to throw in the harbor, we're going to throw in the harbor. And I was like, I might. This might be the day that it goes in the harbor. Because, it was exhausting to continue to run into walls. And COVID was one of the biggest walls because we can't be in the space with the editor. We can't be in a space to interview someone. We can't, right? So all of those things, all of the time.
Can I ask Ashley a quick question? This is totally not going to put you in a spot. Is that okay? Is this not okay?
Go for it.
All right. Ashley, the universe say, like, when we hit that wall, do you remember the story of the two parrots?
Oh, yeah. So we found randomly, in like a couple of days' time, we found these two like playing cards, and they were both 8s. And like, it just was weird because we were in the middle of it. We were really stuck, and the funding wasn't coming through, and our thoughts were paused, and like everything was just coming up against us. And I was just like, I wonder what these would mean if we were doing like divinations or like if we were doing tarot cards. And I looked it up, and sure enough, it was just like, sit tight.
It was a sign, right?
So I was like, okay, guess we're sitting tight. So that's lots of hiccups.
Yeah, no, I feel really bad. This was the smoothest shoot I've ever had. In every other film I've ever done, everything has gone wrong. This one, perfect, whole way through. The only, I just got lucky with things that I didn't plan that were actually better for it, which is, I'll just mention one of those things. I think the entire week that I was supposed to be in PEI, it was supposed to be pouring with rain. And it didn't for 4 days, and only started the second we finished, which was great. And on the last day, we filmed at a cabin, and it was a cabin of one of Dennis's friends who took his own life in that cabin. So that was a very tough day, and I knew that I wanted to film him performing his song in there, Lanterns. But as we were pulling up to the cabin, we were bringing all the equipment up. Dennis was walking behind us, and obviously it's very tough for him to be there. And he was walking behind, playing one of his songs on guitar, just really, really quietly as we were walking through the woods to this cabin. And I just said, this is incredibly powerful. I want it. We've got some extra time. Let's shoot that. And that became a very, very powerful moment in the film where when he's walking to the cabin for the first time since he shot his music video there years ago, and he's playing this song, and it's a very somber moment. So that was a good surprise that happened. And the rest of it, I just could not have gone any better. I was shocked.
Then I'll flip the question for you. How did it go right? In what ways?
So when I did a lot of prep work beforehand in the month leading up to the shoot. So scheduling-wise, prepped everything. I don't think we had any scheduling problems. We ended up having more downtime. And in that downtime, we would just talk about things and discuss and play guitar a little bit and just basically discuss the film through there. And because we had that downtime, it really gave me a better perspective of Dennis. And we had that in the first 2 days. The first day, I think I only used maybe 10 seconds of footage, because the first day that I landed there, we actually were just filming things that I knew I wasn't going to use and didn't tell him because I wanted him to get comfortable in front of the camera. And then by doing that, like the second, third, fourth day were smooth sailing, and it just ended up getting a bunch of really good surprises out of that and having that downtime to discuss it.
Ashley, this one's for you. So as the movie progresses, we come to realize that human stories are all interconnected.
Is that me? Okay.
Even though we express them in various different ways. What was the reason behind using a specific date, in this case September 7, 2012, as the vehicle for storytelling? It's almost like it blossomed from that date, as opposed to stories leading to the date. It began from the date.
Yeah, so sorry. So that day was the day that I was assaulted, and I have attached so much to it over the years. It was 10 years of, I need to escape the city, I need to hike, I need to do something special, I need to camp, I need to, whatever it is I can do to push this out and replace it with other things. I need to replace it with other memories. But I was so caught up in that idea that I literally had no ability to even see that other people actually existed that day. I was too inside of myself and too inside of my own head, for good reason, to be able to do that. But once I had reached the point that I was able to kind of clear some of those thoughts out, is when it came to me. I was like, oh, other people did things that day. How interesting! What a concept. So yeah, I think focusing in on that, it really was just because the date realistically is arbitrary, even though like it's the day I was assaulted. Like it really isn't about the assault at that point. It's about me attaching this connection to it. It's about this this darkness that I've put into it, and so trying to look outside of myself and stop seeing September 7th as a day I own, that I exist in, that kind of owns me in some ways. And so just being like, okay, what else does this day offer? Because we know it offers something else. Someone did die, someone was born, all those things did happen. So let's find out what those stories are, and maybe then I can stop thinking of September 7th as a day that owns me.
Yoni, your film Lanterns Flicker explored a theme that has resonated with us since the beginning of time. What do wars bring us? What can we possibly achieve by engaging in conflicts, or perhaps even prolonging them? Your principal actor, Dennis McKenzie, prompted us to reflect on these questions again through his personal songs. And I recall in the movie he had mentioned, quote, "I did not come back the same from Afghanistan," end quote. Could you share some of the changes that Dennis experienced that eventually inspired him to write his songs?
Yeah, I think a lot of them we cut from the interviews, but he went through a very, very dark period of PTSD after the Army. In the Army, obviously, he spent 7 months in Afghanistan, and any conflict zone will change someone. He had a lot of friends who were lost in the war, and there was the Easter Sunday tragedy, which was 6 soldiers who were killed in a Humvee in an IED explosion, which was, I believe, the most Canadian casualties in one attack in Afghanistan. And Dennis knew 3 of them, I think, at least 3 of them. His son is named after one of them, and he's got a song on the album that's in the film that's based off that. So I don't think for trauma, PTSD is, a lot of people think that it's from one event, and sometimes it is, but if you're in a military or a conflict zone, it's usually a lot of events at once that your mind just registers as that period. So it could be linked to one event, and it could be linked to just a time period. So Dennis went through that, and then dark point when he came back, and it all changed when he had his first son. So that was one of the things that prompted healing, and then he had the event in New Brunswick with the psychedelic mushroom treatment, and that's when he had a dream actually about his concept, the Guardian Angel Platoon, where he basically had a dream that he was walking outside of his house and saw these thousands of soldiers dressed in white, and it was all veterans that were lost to suicide and in general, and that was really what prompted the album, and he based the entire album off that, and that songwriting really led to his healing. Like, he took parts of songs that he had written in the army and rewrote them, or just went back and created this cohesive concept album through it with the help of Dennis Ellsworth, who's a musician from PEI as well.
Actually, this kind of what you just said leads me to my next question, which is, you know, the ways in which music and creative expressions can help connect people and raise awareness about the mental health issues experienced by soldiers who witness trauma in war. How do you think that works?
It's interesting. I feel like it's very subconscious. I'm a musician as well. I'm big into music. That's really why I connected with Dennis. And I think sharing stories through music is definitely a powerful way to connect people who don't necessarily speak the same language or understand the same things, because music has its own language that people just get on a psychological level at this point. So whether it's chords used or rhythm or tempo, like, it all affects people psychologically, and there's a lot of music therapy out there that can explain it a lot better than I can, but I think that's just, it will connect you no matter what. Like, it helps you empathize and sympathize with stories that you would not necessarily have experienced or connected with, and I think the themes are universal, especially through Dennis's story. Like, you've got trauma, you can have that from anything, right? I think there's a big misconception that PTSD is combat. And you hear PTSD and you think Vietnam, World War II, Afghanistan, but it's, everyone experiences trauma in different ways, and everyone's been through something. It's not necessarily as traumatic as that, but it really connects on a deep level to that sense of hope and darkness for everyone who's been through something.
In your case, Ashley, nature seems to play a vital role in your journey toward healing and resilience. Can you share with us perhaps an anecdote that made you, as both the filmmaker and as the main subject of your film, find your way home in the outdoors?
There were a lot of moments that made me just feel like I could breathe easier. But I was on the Skirwink Trail on my first trip that I took by myself. So I'd been on a couple of trips with other people, blah, blah, blah. So this is my first September 7th on my own. And I go to the Skirwink, and I get to the end, and there's just like this rocky beach kind of thing right before you take the path out. And I was walking along, I was like, oh, there might be something cool on this beach. I wonder what's here. And there's literally an eagle feather just like sticking out of the rocks, like pointing straight up. And it's big, like eagle feathers are large. There's all these people on the beach, and I'm like, no one cares about an eagle feather on the beach? This seems odd. Am I the only person who sees this? And I went up and I was like, it absolutely is. And I picked it up, and I just had this sense of like, I am supposed to be here right now. I'm supposed to be here in this moment, walking this beach, and this is for me. So much so that I tattooed the feather on my body. And I think that day, that first trip out on my own, like I just remember like finishing my day up and like going to sleep in my tent, and I felt so content and so proud of myself for like being alone and pushing my own limits and my own boundaries and all of those things, and just being like, okay, I can do this, and I'm gonna be okay. Like, if I can do this on my own, like, think about all the other things that I can handle. And yeah, that was that day, and that particular moment, just everything just kind of fell into place.
I totally understand the feather. I mean, personally, to me, feathers hold a very significant significance, because I tend to, as you said, what is it that it's doing? It's just there on the beach, and it was waiting for you to pick up and to reflect on. So it almost seems like it was left for you as a gift.
It feels like it was there as a gift.
Yeah. So days hold significance for us. John Denver, in one of his songs, said, "Some days are diamonds, some days are stones," which rings true even today. Nevertheless, your film offers hope by showing how we can influence the quality of our days and have greater control over our lives. How can stories of trauma, especially in the field of social work, be transformed into powerful narratives that are capable of changing our hearts and minds?
I feel like stories in the sense of change and in the context of social work and that, I think the really important part is giving people the opportunity to tell their own. Because if someone else had told this story, I wouldn't feel the way I feel. For me to have the ability to narrate my own story and to have input on it and to control all those pieces was so important for me. And so if another person had stood on screen and tried to share my story, that in like a, in a reenactment or whatever, like it's not gonna show the same thing, and I'm not gonna get the same thing from it because I didn't participate and I'm not as involved. And I went absolutely, all the way with it and was like, I'm going to produce it and direct it and be in it and write it and control every little piece I can. But that gave me the opportunity to have that sense of control back, which for folks like myself who've been involved in something where they've lost control and they've lost their sense of control and they haven't been able to necessarily control where the story goes. I think that it provides an opportunity that they wouldn't have otherwise, and the ability to just like regain that ownership. And so I think that that's the biggest thing that this could do.
And Yoni, you've mentioned this a few times already, but Dennis mentioned receiving help from a medicine woman and having dreams that aided him in his journey of self-expression. Can you expand on that a little bit more, and what role that played in his own process of healing from trauma or coming to terms with his trauma?
So he always pinpoints that dream as like a turning point in his healing, when he really started connecting music and everything to healing, and the Guardian Angel Platoon became like the heart of his album. It became the story, it became the name of the album, it became the name of the band and the project. And it's the final song on the album that's really this song of hope, and it all came from that. And I think dreams in trauma are a big deal, huge deal. So you obviously, after experiencing something like war or any trauma, you have nightmares about it. I think that's one of the things that war movies get right about PTSD, is people waking up when they get home and having night terrors and all that. So I think the fact that he had a calming dream about the trauma or related to the trauma is really just psychologically a huge turning point in healing process in general.
Throughout history, we have witnessed many veterans speaking out and questioning the devastating consequences of wars. Dennis's voice and music contribute to that narrative. As an audience member, personally, I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on the broader social and political factors that contribute to the mental health crisis among soldiers returning home from war.
This is definitely a thing I'm passionate about and have talked a lot about, and Dennis as well. I think there's war films in general. There's like two different kinds of war films. Lantern's Flicker kind of fits into the war film genre because it's about a soldier. But most war films are about the wars and then use a soldier to tell the story of that war. This is not a story about the war and just uses a soldier to tell a story about himself. So I think the two different kinds of war films in that mental health kind of aspect are pro-war films and anti-war films, right? You get, in all of them, PTSD is represented a little bit, but it's not about it. And I think there's like a big problem with representation of PTSD in films from war. And I think that's definitely, it's not just night terrors, it's not just people coming home and yelling and then getting pissed off. It's like disillusionment and disassociation and healing, and you're basically by yourself. And it's not one of these things that's just instantaneous and then it gets fixed. It's one of these ongoing processes. So I didn't want to make a film about war. I wanted to make a film about mental health. So this film is basically saying it's not about pro-war or anti-war. It's just saying war is a reality that exists. It's not going anywhere anytime soon, which sucks. And we are all peace activists, especially if you've been in the military. And this is just a horrible, horrible result of it. And I don't care if you're an ally or an enemy or wherever you're from, no one should go through PTSD and no one should go through war. But it is a reality, and this is just how we can change it in a small sort of sense, is bringing people together and making people more aware of it.
I'm going to start wrapping up this conversation, but I have just, I think, 2 other questions. I'll pose this to Ashley. This is specifically for you, but of course, if you feel like you want to jump in, you are welcome to. But for Ashley, how can we enhance community engagement to foster conversations about traumatic experiences?
Oh gosh, that's so big. Allowing space for people to tell their stories, and for people to have conversations, so like literally this. But it does take for people, people need to have that empathy and compassion and that interest and that intrigue to be able to set out to do those things and to see it and to be a part of it. So those moments when we hear and see about someone else's experience and we're like, oh, there's an event and they're going to be talking about something else that I haven't experienced, but someone else did. Like pausing and actually going, like, we need to do that as a community for each other. I need to watch this film because I have experienced trauma, but I haven't experienced that trauma, right? I need to do that. I need to see that. And that's something I consciously have to do, is make time and space for other people and for their experiences. And as a community, I think that we all need to do that. And we all also just need to believe other people, right? We need to believe them when they say, this hurts, this was hard, this experience happened to me, this was terrible. We just need to believe people. But a lot of times, unfortunately, we don't want to believe that bad things are happening, because it's a lot easier to just go, no, I didn't see that, I think everything's good over here, and to kind of like stay cozy around that. But yeah, to share your experiences and then to see where yours cross over with other people, because I haven't been to war, no, but I'm sure that there are things that we could talk about and be like, yeah, I felt that way too, right? So there are common experiences, and so like digging for those, and really taking the time to try and understand other people and where they've been. And as I always have to say when you're talking to survivors of sexual violence, just saying you believe people, those responses are so important. So as a community, that is one of the biggest things you can do, is just say, I believe you.
I don't know if we have time, Ellen, to open up the floor, but just I'll wrap it off with this one. Who was Ashley and who was Yoni before and after the film, the making and production of this film?
There's been so many Ashleys. But I would be lying if I didn't say that I am lighter today than I was when I started this 3 years ago. I have a new set of friends, I have a new community, and I definitely have a new appreciation for where I've been and how it has manifested into today and into the future. So yeah, she's just lighter and happier.
Almost similar. I'm actually currently, I think this just raised awareness of a lot more issues for me. So I definitely want to tackle more films like this and about PTSD and veterans in general, which I did not expect I wanted to do. But it also made me reflect on my own service, which is definitely bringing up some things, but it's good. So I'm definitely more aware of my own mental health and how the Army played a role in that, and in a very good way, in a very productive way and beneficial way. And thanks to Dennis, I'm writing music about it, and it's great. And yeah, I think we should just continue to make films like these and watch films like these, and yeah.
I agree.
Well, thank you so much, both of you. But before we officially say goodbye, I will ask whoever's in the room if you have any questions for our guests here today. Anything that's come to mind, something that maybe you hadn't thought of before, and you're like, I wonder what that is. First thoughts or ideas that have been marinating in mind for a while. Now's the time to perhaps ask.
I have a thought that I'd like to share. I haven't seen Young's film, but I did see Ashby's, and I appreciate the theme of community that you presented in the film. But one thing that really struck me didn't really have to do with that, but it had to do with how the exercise that you went through, how it took power away from a very powerful thing that probably happened to you. Especially the crime is, often we think of it as a crime of power, right? And not only did you not take that power away, but you totally eviscerated it. You didn't refer to it in the film. It's like it didn't exist. Whoever this person was, whoever this perpetrator was, it just didn't exist.
Because he doesn't matter.
Yeah, and that I think was really, really powerful to, and I think it would be it must be a powerful message to other survivors. I think it would have to be.
It has come up in another conversation last week in Cornerbrook, actually, that someone, said the same thing. And yeah, it was a very purposeful way to do things, because this was my story, and it was about me, and so it starts the day after, right? We pick up after, because I wanted to tell that story. I wanted to tell the story of going forward and moving forward, and where I ended up as opposed to where I was in that moment. So yeah, it was a very limited amount of time I wanted to spend on that, because we could sit in that ickiness and that trauma for a very long time, and I could traumatize a whole bunch of other people with that story. But instead, I thought, hey, why don't we tell a story where people can maybe feel good when they leave, right? Where maybe there's hope and a bit of joy on the way out, because this is what I have now found. And I feel very privileged that, my 11 years later looks like this. It is a privilege that's where I am. But it is also possible for some people. So it was very purposeful that we did it that way.
And it was very subtle, because watching the film, you don't even realize it. It's after you think about it, and you think, oh, she went through a terrible thing. But you never think about that when you're watching the film. And it was very well done.
Dom wanted me to cry all the time.
That's how much of it, this is music to Ashley's ears.
Yeah. There's constant debate, so you're just never going to cry. I'm like, no.
No, that was very well done.
Thank you.
I had the same thing with Dennis. Didn't cry once. I was like, all right, I'll go with it.
The one scene where I am crying is actually, I'm not crying about me in that moment. I'm actually crying talking about support that through the magic of film got cut. I'm talking about calling a support line and the kindness that they shared with me. And so the only tears I cried in all of the filming, except for the time that I was really tired and wanted to decorate my Christmas tree, the only time that I cried was in discussing how supported I felt and how beautiful that moment was. That is the only tears. Yeah. So Awesome for Dennis. That makes me feel good.
Yeah, honestly, I was very, very happy with that at the end. I was like, yeah, it's a movie about hope and healing.
Yeah.
That means he's actually
Yes.
gotten through it, and that's the message I wanted.
Yeah.
So
We got
worked
Dom,
out really well.
we got Dom on board eventually. Yeah.
Well, any final parting thoughts or comments or anything that you'd like to, leave us pondering on as we, leave tonight and go on our own ways?
I've already said too much.
I'm just excited for you guys to see Lanterns Flicker tomorrow.
Me too.
Well, thank you so much to Yoni Collins and to Ashley McDonald. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I believe yours has screened already, and yours is screening tomorrow at 1 p.m.
Yeah.
Right. So watch it if you can.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.